Lily Yost, third grader at Nike Elementary, and she's going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Very good. Thank you. Okay. We don't have any presentations on the agenda, but I did want to thank Lily for her gift to the city. So I just want to show everyone here, she brought by this model of City Hall that she made for a school project. So I'd like Lily to stand up and tell us a little bit about this project and why she did it.
Well, I did it for a social studies class at school, and, I got assigned City Hall, so, I wanted to make it really cool. My uncle helped me with it because he's an artist, and we took pictures of it. He printed them off and all that. And we painted the parking lot, and we hot glued a car down to the parking lot. And he said I got a ticket.
Yeah. And so what class was this for?
Social studies.
Social studies. And who's your teacher?
For social studies?
Yes.
Mrs. Crow.
Mrs. Crow.
Not anymore.
Okay. Well, this is a really neat project and a way to get kids involved in what's going on in their community and understanding their community. The other thing that we have here in City Hall is some artwork that's displayed, and this certainly qualifies as artwork from a Gardner citizen, and we are going to be happy to display this at City Hall. So I want to thank you very much. They're such a fine job of putting this together. I'm going to put it on the table in the back so everybody can take a look at it before they leave tonight. And I just wanted to give you a little something from us. It's a little lunch box with a water bottle and some pencils in there. So thank you. Thank you very much, Lily. Okay, great. Thank you very much. So we're going to have to get on to the rest of the business. So you can go back and sit with the folks if you wanted to. Did you want to take a picture before you go? Okay, you want to everybody stand up real quick? Come on over. Larry, you want to get in? Yeah, come on up. Oh, it's going to time one.
There we go.
Got it?
I think I got it, yep.
Perfect. Okay, well, you can show your teacher that. Thank you very much. Very nice.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. There are no other presentations this evening, but we do have time allotted. If members of the public would like to speak on an item that is a city matter not on the agenda, or items that are on the agenda that are not part of a public hearing. That being the case, we will move on to the consent agenda. Is there a council member who wishes to remove an item from the consent agenda?
I'd like to remove item 4.
And item 1 for me.
How would council like to proceed with items 2, 3, and 5?
I move we approve items 2, 3, and 5.
Second.
Motion Harrison, second Morrow, that we approve consent items 2, 3, and 5. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Consent item number 1, minutes from the last council meeting. Larry.
Item 3, where it says city administrator hiring process, I'd like to have added at the end, Councilmember Fodovich asked Mayor Dervetta what gave him the right to exclude the council from interviewing applicants for the city administrator position. The mayor said he has appointed a committee to interview the candidates and that the discussion was over. I'm sorry? Yeah, I mean, you can have.
Thank you.
Any discussion about the addition? All right, how would you like to proceed with consent item number 1?
I move we approve consent item 1 with the addition Councilmember Fodovich documented.
Second?
Motion Harrison, second Morrow, that we approve item 1 with amendments. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Okay, consent item number 4, consider authorizing the interim city administrator to execute a contract with Backyard Pools to provide surface prep and painting services to the Lap Lane Pool at Gardner Aquatic Center. Chris, question?
Jeff, we'll make this pretty quick. Heard from a constituent that was wondering, first off, how Backyard Pools could do this job 330 times cheaper than the aquatic renovation systems. Is there a chance that Aquatic Renovations didn't understand the specifications, or?
Excellent question. Actually, Aquatic Renovation Systems, they did a volunteer bid, did not follow our specifications on repainting the pool. They wanted to bring in and put in another type of material, therefore the cost was much higher.
Okay. And the second question is that since we had the slip and fall last summer, and with these folks doing it less expensive than everybody else, we have nothing but confidence that they're going to be able to do this for the contracted price without sacrificing any safety.
The paint that was specified for this project is identical to what was used the last time it was applied, which was about 4 years ago. No concerns with the material itself. The low bid actually came in just under the actual cost, or the low bid, the last time the pool was done. So that surprised us a little bit, just considering it was 4 years ago. But I have met with the contractor, and he's comfortable with all the specifications. Actually, the representative from Tnemec Paint has been on site, reviewed and approved all of our specifications. The contractor understands that they have to have approval from the Tnemec representative before actually applying the coating system. So references checked out really well. In fact, one of the most recent project done was at McPherson Aquatic Center, and that was a $70,000 job, and they had a lot of success with this company and used the same product.
Okay.
So what was the difference in Aquatic Renovation Systems? What did they want to do differently? And why, I guess? Remember?
Well, I'll have to, let me pull that information and briefly tell you what it is. I'll have to, not following the specifications, it is a different material.
And who did the painting on the other pool?
Daco Painting last year. Aquatic Renovation Systems, in short, they wanted to do an installation of a PVC membrane. I don't have any experience with that type of material, and being well outside our budget, I don't think that's something we can pursue at this time.
Did they say it would last longer or something, or did they?
They did note that the membrane and all welds should carry a 15-year limited warranty.
Including the paint, or, I mean, they'd have to repaint it still?
I don't know that there would be any painting involved. Like I said, I'm not familiar with the product itself, and it wasn't what we specified, so I'd have to do a lot more research before I could bring that to you for a recommendation of any kind.
But this painting process should last 4 years, and they're saying theirs would last 15.
They're saying the membrane will carry a 15-year limited warranty.
I used to live in Florida. There's a lot of pools in the backyards. The membrane, the PVC membrane that they're talking about never really did seem to hold up as well as what was advertised. I can't speak to aquatic renovation systems, but, you know, there was an awful lot of people that became unhappy with it, and then only to find out that their contractor was no longer in business.
Yeah.
I wasn't, and I swam in some of those pools. I wasn't a real big fan of the product, but that's just personal experience.
They would have to do they would have to cut out for all the main drains, inlet skimmers, lights, et cetera, anything that would be involved. Before considering a project of that magnitude, we'd have to do a lot of research and studying. At this point in time, it does definitely need to be painted, so we wanted to pursue this option at this time.
Mike?
I think it also points out the difference in procurement process. Had this been an RFP, maybe we would have entertained that. As a bid, we put out specifications, and technically they're non-responsive to our specifications, so we really don't have the ability to negotiate with them. Since it was a bid and the specs were clear to all vendors, you can't really negotiate on a deal like that. If we were to put out an RFP, makes it a little bit different, and they say, tell us how to solve this problem. It could have come in like that and been higher cost, but if they could have convinced us that it's a better value because it lasts longer, then it's something we can consider. But on the bid, you really can't.
Okay.
That's all I've got, thanks.
Thank you.
How would council like to proceed on consent item number 4?
I move that we authorize the interim city administrator to execute a contract with Backyard Pools.
Second. Motion Morrow, second Freeman, that we authorize the interim city administrator to execute a contract with Backyard Pools for surface prep and painting of the Lap Lane pool. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. New business item number 1, consider authorizing the interim city administrator to execute a change order to the contract with Cordray Construction to address additional guttering that was damaged by the storm. David?
This is the insurance claim that we were working with. When we went for the award, we had said that the guttering was basically underrepresented in the bid process, and we would just extend it based on the unit prices. By the time the work was completed, there was quite a bit more guttering that needed to be done. Total was about $3,060 as indicated in the council action form. That amount was added to the insurance adjuster's estimate. As noted in the council action form, we received about $30,700 as a settlement, which was based on the adjuster's estimate less our deductible. So the final amount that we paid to Cordray, or will pay to Cordray, is $28,385 and change, balanced out to, we received a settlement of about $30,700 for the damage. So the balance will just go into the water fund balance.
Questions?
So the numbers are all the same as they were when they were presented.
Yes.
How come we didn't just put this on the consent agenda?
Change order. Change orders typically ought to be reviewed by the governing body on a major project.
Questions? Concerns? How would council like to proceed with new business item number 1?
I move we authorize the interim city administrator to execute a change order to the contract with Cordray Construction to replace additional guttering that was damaged during the storm in the amount of $3,060.75 for a project total of $28,385.25.
Second.
Motion Harrison, second Morrow, that we authorize the interim city administrator to execute a change order to the contract with Cordray Construction. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. New business item number 2, consider authorizing the interim city administrator to execute a contract for replacement of the master control panel for the lift station at Kill Creek Wastewater Treatment Plant and for the South Lift Station.
The Kill Creek wastewater treatment plant and the South Lift Station were constructed, same design, same construction contract. The control panel for both lift stations is identical design, 10-year-old technology. We've had some issues with one of the circuit boards or control boards within the lift station at the plant. It's basically obsolete. We've received prices back in 2010. We had a spare, so when it failed, we swapped it out. But we received prices from the actual initial installer of it and also another company that were ranging between $30,000 and $40,000 to build a new one. We went ahead and set our budget for this year at $40,000 based on those estimates. Went out for bids, received one bid from Capital Electric. They were just going to replace the entire panel with a new technology panel. The cost was $13,514. Since the South Lift Station, though it wasn't what we planned to do, was the same design, we had $40,000 in the budget. We asked them, well, what would it take to replace 2 instead of 1? They indicated same price. So we're recommending that we go ahead and award to Capital Electric the amount of $27,028 to replace both control panels, one at the lift station at the Kill Creek plant and the other at the lift station at the South Lift Station.
So it's only failed one time,
It has only failed one time, but if it does fail, the plant's down.
but it's all electronics. There's no mechanical components to this. I mean,
This is electronic stuff, yeah. I say it's a,
and what is it? What is the labor to replace? I mean, it's just a board like anything on a furnace or a
well, the problem with
big
the
board or something.
well, the problem with the board is you can't get them. So if it fails, you have to start from scratch, and then you've got another obsolete board. This contract would basically take the old technology out and just replace that panel with a current technology type panel. Once I say, we wouldn't recommend it if it wasn't for the fact if we lose this control panel, we can't pump. If we can't pump, we're backing up.
How long does it take to replace it?
Well, once again, if we do not have, well, to replace it's a fairly quick operation. However, if we don't have, we have one in stock. If it fails, we could swap it out. However, if that fails, then we have to get another one built. And to build it, we're talking somewhere around $30,000 to start from scratch.
Wouldn't we just buy the new Capital Electric board instead?
Well, they're replacing the entire setup.
Right,
For
but I'm saying
$13,000.
if we had more than one failure, we would replace the whole panel, just like you're proposing now, right?
Right, but we're, instead of waiting till it fails, recommending we proceed now. We have it budgeted in the interest of just system reliability. We would recommend proceeding now.
And how much is the board that we purchased that we would end up scrapping?
Well, we haven't, of course, we had one in stock from when the plant came in. So we were pricing it out. We had some extras in hand. However, to get a new one is that number of $30,000.
So, I mean, to replace it though, you call somebody, they come out with the brand-new designed control panel, and how many hours of labor are you talking about then?
Well,
3 or 4 days to install a panel?
not a matter of just pulling the boards, putting in a new one. They're talking.
Come to the podium.
It's not a matter of just taking out the board that failed. They have to take out the guts for the whole panel and then rebuild the whole thing. And then once they do that, then any one of those components can be replaced quite readily, because it's all new technology, new equipment. But the old one is not that way.
If it would fail and we're in an emergency situation, I'm assuming that this $13,000 probably is not, I mean, this is a bid based on the current situation. So an emergency could drive the cost higher.
It certainly could. It would almost certainly be overtime because it never fails during the daytime. It always would fail at night, or on a weekend.
Can't we replace just one board and then use the spare as a backup until it goes bad? I mean, it could be another 10 years, right? I mean, it's not a mechanical component. I mean, electronics either work generally or they get struck by lightning and don't work.
We had two spare panels.
Yeah.
We have had one failure already at this lift station, and we were able at that time to, pull out that one, plug in the spare. So if it happened again, yeah, we could do that one more time at either lift station. But it's likely that they both would fail again, within a short period of time, not necessarily one day or 1 week, but within certainly a year of each other, it's likely both of them will go out. And so we're better off to replace it, we think, both of them now, and then be able to get it done later.
Mr. Green, I just want to make sure I understand correctly. So the 2012 budget, because of the budget unspent funds, it's built into the budget at $40,000 right
That is
now.
correct.
So your recommendation's $13,000 under budget? What's built
Correct.
into the budget for it?
That's
Okay,
correct.
I just want to make sure I understood that clear. It was already built in and a planned expense into your
Right.
2012 plans?
It is part of the budget.
Excellent.
Hey, Jim, I have one more quick question. The original ones that we have in there today lasted about 10 years before becoming obsolete, correct?
Correct.
Any thoughts on how current these are going to remain? I mean, is it,
Well, you never know what they'll come up with tomorrow, but we would anticipate that the current technology, it's been around for, 5 to 8 years now, and would anticipate it would be around for another 20 anyway.
okay, thank you.
And how long before the backups start if the pump fails? Does that take
Probably,
hours, days?
Hours. I mean, not very many hours either. There's a 36-inch pipe delivering the sewage to the plant, and that starts backing up to the south immediately.
We have, I think you mentioned in the last presentation, 60 pumps out there, right? Of different-
Something like that.
Each one probably has a control board.
They do.
So, I mean, what is our plan if those fail?
Well,
They all
most of them
these-
are different type, not this type, and they would be something that we could replace, within an hour or so. But these two in particular, we can't. Not more than once anyway.
Right.
How would council like to proceed?
I move we authorize the interim city administrator to execute a contract with Capital Electric for replacement of the master control panels at the Kill Creek wastewater plant lift station and the south lift station in an amount not to exceed $27,028.
Second.
Motion Harrison, second Freeman, that we authorize the interim city administrator to execute a contract for replacement of the master control panel for the lift station at Kill Creek and for the south lift station. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
Motion carries. Okay, we have council update. We do have an update, I understand, on the Edgerton sewer project.
Again, I'm Jeff Keller with Burns & McDonnell, and I'm here to just take maybe 10 or 15 minutes to go over the results of the study we performed at the direction of the city. About a week and a half ago, we were provided with authorization to move forward on a high-level study to determine the feasibility of sending a portion of Gardner's wastewater flow down to the project currently being developed by Edgerton. The purpose of the study was to determine if there was going to be a substantial potential savings by doing this compared to the cost of making the improvements to your current infrastructure to treat the same flow. The high-level purpose was really to see if it was a discernible savings or if it was very minor, so there'd be an understanding of whether it was worthwhile to go forward or whether it was such a small or a negative impact that it really wasn't worth pursuing. And so on Friday, we submitted electronically our draft report to Public Works, and I believe that the City Council's been provided with copies of that. I do have a few handouts just to go around the table. I don't know that I really need to talk about them, but they are just maybe in part for your reference. I think I'll keep one. Let me just go over the highlights of where we are and what's precipitating this really quickly. Currently, the plan developed by Edgerton is to build a wastewater treatment plant south of I-35 near Homestead Road. Its main purpose would be to serve the intermodal facility and the Kansas City Logistics Park immediately. Sometime in the future, the city of Edgerton would also be connected. So they would operate one plant long-term. In the short term, they'd be operating two. And that's because the cost to connect to it immediately was outside of their budget. The initial capacity of the treatment plant is about 250,000 gallons per day. The collection system would take flows from about 191st Street just west of Waverly Road down to the treatment plant site, and the construction schedule is set to begin operations in 2013, mid-2013, which is the approximate startup date of the intermodal facility as described to us by BNSF. That means, when you back up from a construction standpoint, we need to be building by April or May of this year, which necessitated the design-build approach, which is what the city settled on. So we'll be providing a final price to do the work to the city in early to mid-March, at which point we would commence with a contract to do the design-build work. Right now, our contract with the City of Edgerton is just to do preliminary design and cost. Next slide, please. So what we were addressing in this study was the fact that Gardner currently has 2.5 million gallons a day of capacity at the Kill Creek plant. You're nearing 80 to 90% of your capacity, which is the point at which you are directed by KDHE to start undergoing studies and designs to expand the plant. There is anticipated growth in the southwest portions of the city. The handout that I provided on the front page, just in yellow, generally outlines those subbasins that could possibly be growing, partially due to the influence of the intermodal facility. And the cost to bring all that wastewater up to the next basin is significant. You have to do conveyance system expansion, pumping expansion, treatment plant expansion, and then the operational costs are high too because you essentially have to pump it twice. You're basically going from far downhill to far uphill. So knowing that, first of all, we provided that's okay, I kind of egged you on a little bit. We did, as part of the study, put together an opinion of cost of what serving this area would cost Gardner just using your existing infrastructure, a high-level opinion of cost. Then you can go to the next slide. We also looked at an option of sending it down to Edgerton, the general benefits being a shorter and less costly conveyance system. It's less pipe, to make it short and sweet. The plant upgrades would be more incremental. The way that your current plant is set up, there's a certain minimum size that you can grow the plant at. You don't want to go really below that or it becomes infeasible. The Edgerton plant is smaller, and the incremental growth that it's designed for is smaller also, and it's a little more in line with the size of flows that you might be seeing in these subbasins to the southwest. The overall project cost is smaller, and the only challenge here is that it's a very short schedule to implement if we were to incorporate both of these communities' flows. So the exhibit that I've handed out to city council members is, you've seen up on the screen here, and basically what you see is the two different options shown on one sheet. If you look about 60% down the page at about 191st and Waverly, we've got kind of a dashed white line. That's what we're calling our hinge point. If you go north of that line, it shows the pipeline system you'd have to build to get to your treatment plant. And if you go south of that line, you see the pipeline system that would need to be built to get your flows to the Edgerton treatment plant. And just a quick visual inspection shows it's a lot less pipe. It's a shorter distance, and it's primarily downhill. A lot of the cost for the collection system has to do with you've got lots and lots of rock. Very shallow, very hard rock, and it makes putting pipe in the ground in a lot of these areas really expensive. Necessitating a lot of pump stations and all those things so you don't have to dig into rock. So that makes the conveyance piece of the project disproportionately costly if you look at other parts of the country where they don't have rock everywhere. So any savings you get on that collection system has a big impact, all right? Go to the next slide. In the study, we broke out project phasing into three pieces, and that's mainly driven by the fact that if you were to send your flows down to the Edgerton wastewater plant, they would upsize that plant in 3 phases. So we tried to make this as apples to apples as possible in terms of sizing, in terms of phasing, so you can really make as fair an evaluation as you can. For Gardner to serve that area, you'd need to do the following things that are bolted up there: expansions to pump stations, new pipeline, plant expansion. And that's just in Phase 1. Phase 2, there's another small expansion at the lift station. Phase 3, by that time, you've done everything you're going to do to serve this area, and there's nothing going on in Phase 3. So you've got one giant phase in the front, a little work in the second phase, and then you're good. On the Edgerton option, good job, it's a little more distributed. You still have a lift station, you still have some piping, you still have an upsize at the treatment plant. It's a much smaller upsize, you'll note. And then there's some other significant phasing going on afterwards, including some expansions of existing facilities, some changes to the treatment plant, some technology changes, but it's more spread across the 3 phases. Now that's all well and good. How does that translate into bottom dollar? If you go to the next slide, this is how it works. In the Gardner option, you're doing 80 to 90% of your work in Phase 1, spending 80 to 90% of the overall project budget, and it tapers off quickly. You also get a lot of capacity, but it's a lot of capacity you don't really need to serve this area. It's a bit overkill. Now, someday you'll probably need it, but we were focusing on this series of basins. So please understand, I'm not talking about the city as a whole. It's serving this area. On the Edgerton option, you can see that the amount of cost is distributed a lot more equally across the 3 phases, and you get a fairly small increase in capacity, adequate to your needs, and then more substantial as you look towards the future. So what I have here is the estimated projected savings by phase. If I were to show estimated costs for both options, there are ranges, because what's built into them are projections. What's inflation going to be? What are construction costs going to change? What's the depreciation rate? You get a big range, and then you get a big range over 3 different phases, over 2 different projects. You would have a screen full of numbers here. So I'm just trying to make it as simple as possible. Phase 1, because you were doing a much smaller incremental increase in treatment capacity, and because the collection system expansion is so much less, the cost difference, as projected, is about $18 million. I mean, that is very significant. Now, Phase 2 and Phase 3, you still have to do things at the Edgerton facility, and so that's shown as a negative. That takes away from your cost savings. But at the end of the day, you still come out ahead by somewhere between $7 to $8 million. That's our best projection, and that's all it is a projection. These values are in 2012 dollars. We haven't adjusted anything. I can tell you, I did some playing around today with inflation rates, but the phasings are only 3 or 4 years apart. And interest rates, anybody who has money in the bank right now can tell you there's no such thing as an interest rate. So it doesn't do much. I mean, you might gain another $1 million or $2 million in savings when you look at the impact of inflation. But, who knows? If inflation stays at 1%, that's maybe there, maybe it's not. I think these numbers are a lot more conservative. In this projection, we use the most conservative values as possible, all right? We assume that the funding would be through a state funding source, meaning you'd have to use prevailing rate wages, which makes everything more expensive. You may or may not choose to do that. When we had a decision to make, one option versus the other, we tried to make them equally conservative on both sides, the purpose of which was to magnify the difference. Okay? So these numbers are not written in stone. Please understand that. but they do demonstrate that there is a significant savings to be made of some sort choosing to send your flow to Edgerton compared to Gardner. So where does that come from? Well, the Bull Creek Pump Station, which exists right now, it would need a significant upgrade to handle that flow. And that's pretty costly. It's $700,000, $900,000. So it's quite a bit. The pipelines, as you can see by the figure I handed out, they're much shorter. You have economy of scale, which means for every yard of concrete you pour, every gallon you treat, when you're combining projects, those things get cheaper. Some expansion now versus doing all the expansion up front, that does help. It's pretty minor, though. And just in general, the expansion at Kill Creek, that plant is designed to be expanded in increments of 2.5, not 1.25. And so as you shrink that expansion down, you lose economy of scale. You can't take a 2.5 million gallon expansion and say it's going to cost $20 million and say, well, if I do half it, it's going to cost 10. And that doesn't work. It doesn't work that way because you can't build half of everything. You got to put in all the pipes. You got to pretty much put in all the electrical. You got to do pretty much all the civil. And so all you're left with is some concrete and some labor. So you're kind of falling into the 70% rule, which is you cut something in half, you still pay for about 70% of it. And that first bullet point, that last bullet point, and those really add up to a substantial savings. I mean, your collection system is a huge piece of that. So the next steps, if the city were to be interested in this option, would be to join with the city of Edgerton to talk about how the project would be funded in terms of capital outlay, in terms of cost of service payments. It's not in my scope at all, nor am I, qualified to talk about these things. But that would be the logical next step. There's been a suggestion of there being a task group with Edgerton to try and expedite that process. That's because time is of the essence. These savings are based upon the improvements at the treatment plant being incorporated into the design-build project that we're undergoing right now. And the idea is that within a handful of weeks, we would be under contract. So there's a lot of design changes, a lot of permitting discussions with the state that would have to be held, and it's going to be pretty challenging to make it work. The sooner that there can be a decision one way or the other, the more of that savings you can realize. As this time frame gets pushed further and further out, it turns into a change to the project and not integrated at the beginning. And those cost savings start to disappear because you've got remobilization, you've got redesign, you've got various state agencies not necessarily operating that quickly. And so that's the next steps is really to decide what the feeling of the council is and decide if there is time available to do something like this. That's all I have to talk about officially here. I'm available if you want to ask me any questions now. If not, you can reach me at any time. I'm close to business. Thank you.
Questions?
Yeah, I just have a quick question. I'm not sure if you answer this or if Dave does, but if we put a task force in place, at what point do we say, okay, we definitely want to move forward with this? I mean, so right now we're still in this, I'm assuming, kind of learning, talking about financing, what have you. At what point do we make the decision?
I'd say based on what you've presented, it's probably the sooner the better. I'd say we need to probably be making a decision by March 5th.
Yeah, just from my standpoint, to meet the schedule to get the plant running in time for BNSF to utilize it, we have to be doing construction by April. And so we really need to have a decision in the next, few weeks, early March, which I understand is very short. But otherwise, we can't make those changes and get them integrated to maximize the savings here.
So how long have you been working on this project?
Probably 14 months.
And why didn't someone come to us, at the third month and say, oh, by the way, you might benefit from this? I mean, you sent this document on the 17th, which was Friday. I didn't get it until 2:30 today. I don't know why that is, but it seems like everything's being rushed along, and it seems like an engineer would have been able to say, hey, certainly 9-10 months ago, this might be an option.
Yeah. Our scope of work was to provide the scope requested by the city of Edgerton, and that's what we've been doing. This issue came up approximately 4 weeks ago to us.
But I mean, who said we might benefit from this and didn't? Didn't it occur to anybody that it might have, we might need more time to plan this out, or that, I guess it just feels kind of like, anytime somebody asks me to make a quick decision on a large purchase, I get a little nervous.
It made us a little nervous too, but when we realized that they were in fact going to be building a treatment plant and about where they were looking to do it, the thought definitely occurred to me very quickly at that point that yes, that would be to our advantage to get in on it. But we didn't know where they were going to build a treatment plant or what was going on until about a month ago. And,
Why didn't they know where they were going to build the treatment plant? Why?
but,
Edgerton.
you know,
Well, the location of the treatment plant is subject to negotiations with Johnson County Parks Department. It's their land, and so we're acquiring it from them. And until just recently, we didn't have a certain level of confidence that we'd be able to acquire the land.
Well, I guess, where was your first choice where to put it? I mean,
Well, that was the first choice. It's just taken some time
And
to
they-
develop the level of confidence that it's going to be
and
provided.
they thought they may have another use for it? Is that why they
I can't speak on what their rationale is.
just didn't respond until 4 weeks ago, roughly? Is that right, Eric?
Well, what I know is that I was directed to discuss this with the city about 4 weeks ago.
With our city?
Yes.
And that was initiated by Jim's question to Edgerton or Burns and Matt?
to Edgerton.
Okay. So it came, went that route.
Go
ahead.
From, I guess through the analysis process, though it was a short window, has there been any run of whatever it might have been, numbers, planning period, that shows that there's a disadvantage to Gardner to partnering in this sort of thing? Is there any disadvantages that we've not discussed?
The disadvantage, it's a risk. And the risk is, this is based on the assumption that the development in those basins is going to happen
Right.
in a fairly short amount of time. You'll have a treatment plant ready to accept flow from those basins in mid-2013. So the risk that you run into is if there's nobody in those basins, then you have service to nobody. That's the main risk.
Is that risk offset by the smaller investments and smaller improvements we'll have to make at the other facilities down the road? Is that risk weighted versus the alternative of the wait-and-see approach?
Well, it depends on how you want to weight that probability. I think the thought by the Public Works is that because of what's going on in that part of the county, that's a very likely place to see growth. Is that fair?
There's been interest there. As it stands now, if we did nothing, we ultimately will end up putting another lift station on the other side on the east side of Waverly. So we'll be pumping north through the Bull Creek plant. If we go here, which was earlier master plans prior to BNSF, always showed a lift station in this area.
Okay.
This is the one that was always planned. So in this case, but there has been interest. When that finally does start up, the odds are there's going to be a lot of interest there.
Sure.
And once there is interest, then the only thing that has to happen is to get gravity sewers to this particular lift station.
And with this plan, the scalability of it is, that gives us a lot of room to do this on a smaller scale in increments, correct?
Right.
Because
That is
compared to what the alternatives would be, where we'd have to build these big pieces at big cost, we're able to do this a much smaller scale as needed, right? And we're not as tied into it? I hope I'm not
That's right.
oversimplifying.
No,
it.
you're describing it exactly right. But just to be clear, the improvements that you'll need to do at the Kill Creek wastewater plant will come someday. This pushes it out because other parts of your city are going to grow, and it's still going to be served by Kill Creek. So you're pushing it out by whatever rate of growth you experience in the city. So I don't want you to think that Kill Creek is all done. It just takes a portion of the flow that you'd have to be growing the plant for and moves it to another location where the economics are better.
The task group, I got an email from Mike late Friday. I'd asked Chris and Larry serve on that. Chris said he would. Larry has declined, so we'll need someone else to serve on that. If you or, Christie, you're off the sign.
I'm not on the sign, Brian is.
Oh, Brian's on the sign, so you're off the sign. We need someone to serve on that. This task group will be responsible for determining percentage of payment on the capital, as well as rate structures and expectations for rate structure and so on. Is that the intent of the task groups?
I think the biggest piece would be the capital costs and then the financing plan for the capital cost. As far as the operating costs, should we proceed, actually Jim has got a draft agreement pretty well put together, which was mirrored from what we've already entered into with Olathe. So as far as coming up with a structure that won't establish the cost, but will establish the mechanisms to determine the cost for operations is, a draft document is almost ready. We've just jumped the gun in case we needed it. I think the hard part will be to determine what the cost will be that Gardner's share would be, and then Gardner will have to figure out a way to pay it. Because I think really the only downside of this whole thing is a change in cash flow projections. The costs we're avoiding, we're going to have to pay sometime. We can stall them until that basin develops. But once it does, if we choose to support the development or to proceed, we're going to have to do it. In this way, we've already got the way to provide sewer service to that southwestern area is set up. So
I'm sorry, correct me if I'm wrong, but the city was approached by the property owners of 191st and Waverly to put together a cost for this type of...
Yes, we've estimated the cost for the lift station that we would have to put in several times for several different scenarios. And it just depends on when someone decides to proceed.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Green, when you mentioned the mirroring the agreement that we have with the city of Olathe, when that came up, did we have to put out any capital expenditures to help with the construction or with that facility at all, or is it just an agreement for service?
No, it is. We're in for, Jim, correct me, it's about $120,000 a year.
Yeah, for, I believe it's 10 years or 15.
Okay.
Right.
For capital expense.
Right. We haven't started paying since it's on temporary note basis right now, but as they do, we will have the option to pay it up front or to pay on time.
Okay.
So the ownership, just a projected ownership level is what percent for Gardner versus Edgerton?
The study that we did essentially said, what additional cost would it be to serve Gardner? And if you look at the long-term projections, it ends up being, I don't have an answer because it really depends on the growth rate in Edgerton. But it won't be 90-10. It'd be closer to 60-40. And it all depends on what kind of growth rates you see in Gardner and what growth rates you see in Edgerton. But the best answer I can give you is it's much more on par with one another. There's not going to be one minor and one major.
Another question on the discussion about the infrastructure. Would we be responsible for the infrastructure that we install, or is that be part of the service, or is that part of the discussion with the task group?
I would think, according to, that's to be determined by the task force as well, but generally speaking, if it's in the city limits of Gardner, we would be responsible for it, and if it's the only pipe that's serving only us, we would probably be responsible for that. But once they come together, then it would be either a percentage or mainly Edgerton, and we would pay them to treat the sewer.
Right. I know the treatment piece, I assume, would be all Edgerton, and that would be a fee-based agreement. But the maintenance of the infrastructure, improvement of the infrastructure, and so on. I understand the construction piece, but it's the ongoing maintenance and who's responsible.
And the Edgerton plant, the treatment plant itself, again, that would be up to the task force to decide the exact percentages, but I would assume that Edgerton would take care of the operational cost of that, and we would be paying them for that. But the capital cost to install it, up to the task force to figure out how to split that.
So how, has the county been approached for ownership of it? Why isn't the county,
We did talk to the county extensively about this.
and what did they say?
That as soon as we brought it up to their standards and invested several millions of dollars, they would consider taking it over.
I think you're talking at cross purposes. Larry, you're talking about just the treatment plant down here?
Right.
Oh, okay, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
Yeah, right, yeah, we had talked about turning the whole thing over as part of the public-private partnership, but what about the plant, just this particular plant here? I mean, they paved a $7 million road that
Mhm.
most people will never use, so certainly they'd be interested in what.
Gardner hasn't approached the county about the plant because we had found that Edgerton was proceeding to build one. So I don't know whether Edgerton did or not. You know?
No, I don't know. I know that the agreement with BNSF and Edgerton is what is driving the project. And so that's a service they're providing to the intermodal, and everything else is sort of a secondary effect to that.
From the standpoint of next steps, start with the task force, work together with that group to see if there's an agreement, and then a report back on, is the 5th doable, or would it need to be a special meeting, or is it?
I just don't know how much progress they would be able to make quickly. My guess is it would be fairly quick.
It's this week and next week, essentially, right? Yeah.
But what is you were able to determine how much the savings will be, but you don't know the total cost.
Well, we do. What happened was, since we have, variable inflationary pressures on the prices, you have a high and low range for one option, you have a high and low range for the other, but since you're applying them equally, the cost difference ends up being about the same. If you have, low inflation, if interest rates stay at 1%, you have one set of numbers, and if inflation jumps up to 2 or 3, it's different, but they jump about the same amount, and so your savings is about the same. But again, the savings that I showed are based on projections. It could be off, but the point is the magnitude of them is so large that even if you're off, it still ends up very positive.
Right, but the cost is what, the taxpayers are gonna bear.
Oh, yeah, and
So-
that's a good point. I understand what you're asking. Right now, because we are in a preliminary design phase with the city of Edgerton, what will happen in about a month is we'll have a final price for the project, and that we're not under contract to do the job. We're under contract to develop the price. And at some point in the next month, we will have a fixed price to do the work. And the city could elect to say, no, thank you, or we want to do something about this price, or whatever they want. And then we regroup if we need to and do whatever needs done. So we're not in a place to know the exact price for this effort any more than we are for Edgerton, but we're working down that road.
But I mean, certainly you have an estimate. So
Oh,
we could,
yeah.
we would know.
Yeah.
So what is our portion of that cost?
Well, what part of it do you want to hear? Let me give you just a few numbers,
The taxes
okay?
are gonna be paying, that's what I want to hear.
Well, yeah, let me give you just a few numbers, okay, so you can kind of put this into context. And I would give you the numbers for both the Edgerton option and the Gardner option, as we're describing them, okay? The Gardner option being treating your own wastewater, Edgerton being the other.
So the
Yeah.
Gardner option is moving all the sewage up to the Kill Creek plant?
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly right. The conveyance, meaning the pipeline and pump station improvements, to do that within Gardner, the price range is somewhere between $9 and $10 million for the improvements, the capital improvements. The Edgerton option, the capital would be between $3.5 and $4.5 million. So it's that's one of the more dramatic cost differences. In terms of the overall project, meaning conveyance, multiple phases, all the way out until both options would have equivalent treatment which is probably 2021, 2019, something like that. You're talking about a difference of, on Gardner's side, it might cost somewhere between $22 and $28 million. If you went with the Edgerton option, it might be somewhere between $16 and $20 million. So that's the magnitude, which I think is kind of what you were asking
So
about.
28 to, well, the first number was 28 to what number?
22 to $28 million possibly,
Versus,
versus 16 to $20 million.
And that includes the pipe, so that's.
Yeah, that includes,
all
that's,
projects.
yeah, that's
Okay,
the
got it.
kitchen sink.
so, and what does that cost mill levy-wise, would you say?
This is rate, not tax.
So what rate increase? I mean, seems like a lot of
Well, you would do
overhead.
it, you would only have to do it based on your payments each year. You wouldn't have to fund the whole 20 million or 22 million or whatever all at one time. So if you had a payment for debt, somebody does, somebody will have a debt payment, whether we're paying it to Edgerton or paying it directly, it would be each year's piece of that. So if you ran it over 10 years, it'd be one rate, over 15 years, it'd be another.
What would we normally finance this for?
Well, we've been doing, we've moved away from 10, we're moving into 15 right now. The last Still Creek plant, when we first did it, was 20.
20 years.
So, you know, what does 1% increase, we figured that when we talked about,
35,000 for 1%,
how much?
35,000.
So, you know,
35,000 for a 1% increase?
is all the revenue it makes currently.
Whether that be growth or rate. And we're assuming about 1 to 2% growth a year, and rate would be whatever it takes to make up the difference.
So $20 million plant, you can take it times 1.25, divide it by 15, I don't have a calculator here.
Nor do I.
But look, these are really rough. 20 million times 1.25 divided by 15, that'll be your annual payment. And that would be conservative, that's probably high, but
1.6 million, I think.
20 million divided by, what was that number?
multiply it by 1.25, divided by 15. Rough. That's probably high, but rough.
Very good. 1.66 million.
Yeah.
So, and,
So that's,
and then what does that mean to us?
that sounds too much.
No,
That sounds
right,
better.
right. Yeah, I think it does. Lucky kid.
Do you think it's too high?
No, I think that's
Do
about.
you think
what
that's
it is.
about right?
Yeah.
That sounds like a lot.
It does, but we've been, we're looking at about 1 million for the initial construction of it every year.
Yeah.
So what does that number yield for rate increases?
Okay, so now that's the debt payment.
Okay,
And now you gotta figure out, but you've got some growth to add in, growth or rate increases. How much increase we have to come up with that number. So if 1% currently makes $35,000, and you need a payment of $1.5 million,
so divide by 35,000,
Now, these are really down
40,
30.
47.6